Tyler Webb steered his beat-up transport pod into the docking bay of orbital station Kepler-7. The clock on his dashboard blinked 2,200 hours. 10 o'clock at night, though in space, night and day were just words people used to feel normal. He killed the engine and sat there for a moment, staring at the massive maintenance hangar through his viewport. Empty. Completely empty. No crew shuttles. No mechanics loading equipment. No maintenance bots zipping around doing their pre-shift diagnostics. Just flickering overhead lights and the constant low hum of the station's life support systems keeping everyone from dying in the vacuum of space. Tyler grabbed his toolbox from the passenger seat and pushed himself out of the pod. His boots maglocked to the deck plating with that familiar metallic click. He'd been working on space stations for 12 years now, ever since he was 18, and that sound still gave him comfort. Solid ground, even if that ground was spinning through the void at thousands of kilometers per hour. The bay door slid open as he approached. Inside, the maintenance deck stretched out like a small city. Repair stations lined both walls, each one designed to service ships from a dozen different alien species. Fuel lines hung from the ceiling like sleeping snakes. Tool racks stood empty where the day shift should have organized everything. Nobody had organized anything. The previous night crew had quit 2 days ago. All of them. At the same time. Tyler had heard rumors about why. Impossible workloads. Equipment failures. Some guys said the station AI was going crazy, giving contradictory orders. Others whispered about sabotage, though nobody could say who or why. All Tyler knew for certain was that station management was desperate enough to pay triple wages for anyone willing to work nights alone until they found replacements. Triple wages. That was hard to ignore when your daughter needed surgery that cost more than you made in 2 years. A holographic display flickered to life near the main workstation. The station's maintenance AI, designated MANT-7, projected itself as a floating blue sphere. It didn't have a face, but somehow it always managed to sound judgmental. Welcome, Mechanic Webb. Your shift assignment includes 17 vessels requiring full service, 32 minor repairs, and a backlog of 41 diagnostic flags from the previous crew. Estimated completion time with current staffing levels is 48 hours. Your shift is 8 hours. Please advise how you intend to proceed. Tyler dropped his toolbox on the workbench with a clang. One job at a time, like always. The previous crew attempted that approach and fell progressively behind schedule until they resigned. Yeah, well, maybe they weren't trying hard enough. Tyler pulled up the work roster on his tablet. 17 ships. He whistled low. That was brutal for a solo shift. Even with a full crew of 5, they'd be pushing to get through that in 8 hours. Movement caught his eye. Something large and insectoid scuttled across the far wall on 6 legs. Tyler tensed for a second before recognizing the Vraxi port inspector. The aliens looked like someone had crossed a praying mantis with an armored beetle and then made it the size of a grown man. Their species ran most of the Port Authority operations across this sector of space. The Vraxi clicked its mandibles together, which was how they showed disapproval. Tyler had worked with enough of them to recognize the gesture. The inspector's translator box crackled to life, rendering its clicking sounds into flat, emotionless English. 1 human mechanic to service 17 vessels. This violates minimum staffing protocols. I will file a deficiency report. Tyler shrugged. File whatever you want. I'm what you've got tonight. The inspector's antennae twitched with what might have been irritation. The Vraxi do not believe in individual exceptionalism. Work is completed through proper protocol and adequate staffing. You will fail. Probably, Tyler agreed. But I'll fail while getting paid triple, so there's that. The inspector made a sound like grinding gears and scuttled away toward its office pod. Tyler watched it go, then turned back to his tablet. Might as well start with something easy. He pulled up the first ship on the roster. Terran Cargo Hauler, registration TC-4782. Standard fuel system service and diagnostic check. Should be straightforward. He grabbed a diagnostic scanner from the tool rack and headed toward the service dock where the hauler was berthed. The ship was typical of human cargo vessels. Blocky, practical, with exactly zero concern for aesthetics. Big enough to haul container loads between stations but small enough to dock at facilities like Kepler-7. Tyler connected his scanner to the external diagnostic port and waited while it ran through the automated checks. Fuel system check. Reactor output nominal. Life support functioning. Navigation systems all green. Everything looked perfect according to the computer. Tyler frowned. He pulled up the fuel consumption log and compared it to the ship's manifest. The hauler had refueled at Kepler-7 3 days ago. Since then, it had burned through its reserves at a rate of He did the math twice to make sure, 3% higher than it should have. 3% didn't sound like much. Most mechanics would shrug it off. Hell, the previous crew had literally marked it as acceptable variance in their notes. But Tyler's old man had taught him one thing that stuck. When it comes to ships in space, there's no such thing as acceptable variance. Either your numbers are right or they're wrong, and wrong gets people killed. He pulled up another ship's records. Another Terran vessel, this one a passenger transport. Same 3% fuel consumption increase after servicing at Kepler 7. Then another. A colony supply ship. Same problem. Tyler checked 4 more human ships. Every single one showed the same pattern. They'd come in with normal fuel efficiency, gotten serviced at this station, and left burning 3% more fuel than they should. But here was the weird part, he pulled up records for alien vessels. A Carthian or hauler. Normal fuel consumption. An Altair diplomatic yacht. Perfect efficiency. A Quellan science vessel. Right on target. Only human ships showed the problem. Only after being serviced at Kepler 7. Tyler sat back on his haunches, staring at the numbers on his tablet. Around him, the maintenance bay hummed with background noise. Ventilation systems, distant ship engines, the occasional hiss of hydraulics. His mind raced through possibilities. Could be a calibration error in the refueling system. But that would affect all ships, not just human ones. Could be contaminated fuel, but again, species-specific contamination made no sense. Could be faulty diagnostic equipment giving false readings, except the consumption rates matched the actual fuel usage, not just the sensors. Or it could be something nobody wanted to think about. Something deliberate. Tyler glanced at the clock. 2,300 hours. He had 7 hours left in his shift and 16 more ships waiting. The smart play was to do the basic service work, mark everything as complete, collect his triple pay and go home. That's what the previous crew had done. But Tyler kept seeing that 3% variance. Kept thinking about ships burning through fuel faster than they should. Kept wondering what happened when a colony ship on a 6-month journey came up short on fuel because nobody bothered to investigate a minor discrepancy. He opened a comm channel to an old friend on Mars Station. Danny Briggs, another mechanic who'd learned the trade the old-fashioned way, by actually fixing things instead of trusting computers to do it for them. Danny, it's Tyler. I need you to check something for me. Pull your fuel consumption logs for human ships serviced in the last 6 months. Tell me if you see anything weird. There was a pause. Then Danny's voice came back, suspicious. What kind of weird? The kind that shouldn't be there. Tyler closed the channel and stood up. He had work to do. Real work. The kind that might get him fired, but also the kind that might save lives. Around him, the empty maintenance bay suddenly felt less lonely and more like the quiet before something big. Something was wrong at Kepler 7. And for better or worse, Tyler Webb was the only person on the night shift who seemed to care. 3 nights into his solo shift, Tyler had maybe slept a total of 9 hours. He couldn't stop thinking about those fuel numbers. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw percentages and consumption rates scrolling through his mind like some kind of twisted nightmare. His apartment was a mess. Empty coffee containers covered the kitchen counter. His tablet sat on the dining table surrounded by printouts of maintenance logs, fuel reports, and service records he'd pulled from the station's database. His daughter had called twice asking if he was okay. He'd lied both times and said everything was fine. Everything was not fine. Tyler arrived at the maintenance bay at 2,130 hours, half an hour early. He couldn't wait anymore. He'd spent his entire day off cross-referencing data, and what he'd found made his stomach turn. 6 months of records. Hundreds of ships. Every single human-built vessel that got serviced at Kepler 7 left with that same 3% fuel inefficiency. Every single one. The alien ships? Perfect. No problems. No variance. Just the humans. Danny from Mars Station had called him back yesterday. His voice had been tight, worried. Tyler, I checked our logs. We've got the same thing. Started about 7 months ago. I never noticed because the numbers were marked as acceptable. What the hell is going on? That was the question, wasn't it? What the hell was going on? Tyler bypassed the main workstation and headed straight for the parts storage area. Rows of components stretched out under harsh LED lighting. Fuel injectors, reactor seals, navigation chips, life support filters. Everything a mechanic needed to keep ships running. Everything organized by species and ship class because different civilizations built their vessels completely different ways. He found the human ship components in section D7. Fuel injector assemblies, specifically. The boxes were labeled with official manufacturer seals from Drexler Stellar Components, one of the biggest suppliers in known space. They'd been around for 30 years. Solid reputation. Premium parts. Tyler pulled one of the boxes down and opened it. Inside, nestled in protective foam, sat 6 brand new fuel injectors. They looked perfect. Gleaming metal, precision-machined edges, certification numbers etched into the housing. He held one up to the light, turning it slowly. Too perfect. That was the thing that bothered him. Tyler had been installing parts for over a decade. He knew what fresh components looked like. There were always tiny imperfections. Microscopic tooling marks. Slight variations in the metal finish where different batches got processed. These injectors looked like they'd been made by the exact same machine at the exact same moment. Identical. Flawless. He grabbed his microscanner, the one his dad had given him when he first started as an apprentice. It was old tech, but it worked better than most of the fancy equipment the station provided. Tyler ran it over the injector's internal nozzle, zooming in to the microscopic level. There. Tiny grooves scored into the metal at precise intervals. They were so small the standard diagnostic scanners wouldn't catch them. But they were there, and they absolutely would cause increased fuel consumption. Not enough to trigger alarm systems. Just enough to make ships burn through fuel 3% faster than they should. Tyler checked another injector. Same grooves. Another one. Same pattern. Every single injector in the box had been deliberately damaged in a way that looked like normal manufacturing but wasn't. His hands started shaking. This wasn't an accident. This wasn't faulty equipment or calibration errors. This was sabotage. Systematic, calculated sabotage that had been going on for at least 6 months, probably longer. He pulled up his calculation spreadsheet on his tablet. If every human ship serviced at Kepler 7 for 6 months had been fitted with these defective injectors, and if those ships had burned 3% more fuel than they should have, he ran the numbers 3 times because he didn't want to believe the result. 15 million credits. Conservative estimate. That was how much extra fuel cost ship captains had paid without knowing something was wrong. 15 million credits siphoned away by barely noticeable inefficiency that everyone marked as acceptable variance. But who benefited? Who made money when ships burned more fuel? Tyler's comm unit buzzed. It was the station director, Phillips. Her face appeared on his screen and she looked exhausted. Bags under her eyes. Hair pulled back in a messy bun. She'd probably been dealing with complaints all day. Webb, I need you to pick up the pace. We've got ships backing up at the dock. Captains are threatening to file delay complaints. I need those service bays cleared faster. Tyler looked at the defective injector in his hand. Director, I need to talk to you about something. The fuel systems on human ships. There's a problem with the replacement parts. Phillips sighed. Webb, if the parts passed inspection and have valid certification, they're fine. Install them and move on. We don't have time for perfectionism right now. This isn't about perfectionism. These parts are defective. They're causing ships to burn more fuel than they should. Someone's doing this deliberately. There was a long pause. Phillips rubbed her temples like she had a migraine. Do you have proof? Real, actionable proof that would stand up to corporate legal review. Tyler hesitated. I have the fuel consumption data and the parts with microscopic damage. That's pretty solid evidence. Evidence of what, exactly? Manufacturing defects happen. Fuel consumption varies based on dozens of factors. Unless you can prove deliberate sabotage with clear intent and identify the responsible parties, all you have is speculation. And speculation doesn't shut down a major parts supplier. People are being overcharged. Ships are burning through fuel reserves faster than they should. This could be dangerous. Phillips leaned closer to her camera. Webb, I appreciate your diligence. I really do. But Drexler Stellar is a major contractor. They supply parts to half the stations in this sector. If we accuse them without overwhelming evidence, they'll bury us in legal action. The station can't afford that. Do your job. Service the ships. Let corporate handle the big picture. The call ended before Tyler could respond. He stood there in the parts storage area holding a sabotaged fuel injector, feeling completely powerless. Around him, the station hummed with normal activity. Life support systems, reactor cores, thousands of people going about their business completely unaware that something was deeply wrong. His tablet buzzed with an incoming message. Danny from Mars Station. Just talked to my buddy on Titan Base. They've got the same fuel consumption problem. Also talked to someone at Europa Station. Same thing. Tyler, this is happening everywhere. What do we do? Tyler looked at the work roster on his screen. 17 ships waiting for service. Behind them, dozens more would arrive tomorrow. All of them trusting that the mechanics knew what they were doing. All of them assuming that certified parts from reputable suppliers were safe. The next ship on his list was called the Horizon's Promise. Tyler pulled up its specs and felt his blood run cold. Colony ship. 4,000 people in cryosleep. Destination: New Arcadia, a colony world 4 months away. The ship had been serviced at Proxima Station 2 weeks ago. According to the records, it had received new fuel injector assemblies. Drexler stellar components. Tyler ran the calculations. With those defective injectors, the Horizon's Promise would burn through its fuel reserves in 3 months and 10 days. It would run out of fuel 3 weeks before reaching New Arcadia. 3 weeks from anywhere. Too far for rescue ships to reach in time. 4,000 people would wake up from cryosleep to discover they were drifting in deep space with no hope of survival. They'd die slowly as life support systems failed and the ship went dark. His hands clenched into fists. Phillips had told him to stay in his lane. Let corporate handle the big picture. Do his job and stop asking questions. But his job was keeping people alive. That was what mechanics did. They kept the machines running so people could survive in an environment that would kill them in seconds without proper equipment. Tyler pulled up the Horizon's Promise trajectory data and calculated when it would dock at Kepler 7 for its final pre-departure inspection. 6 hours. The ship would arrive in 6 hours, get cleared by station authority, and launch toward 4,000 deaths that nobody except Tyler seemed to know about. He looked around the empty maintenance bay. No crew to back him up. No supervisors to appeal to. Just him, his tools, and a choice that would either save lives or end his career. The Vraxi inspector scuttled past, mandibles clicking in what Tyler now recognized as disapproval. It paused and turned its insect head toward him. You are behind schedule, human mechanic. Efficiency continues to decline. Tyler met its multifaceted eyes. Yeah, well, efficiency isn't everything. He grabbed his tablet and headed for the communication station. He had 6 hours to figure out how to stop a colony ship from launching toward disaster. 6 hours to find proof strong enough that even station management couldn't ignore it. The night shift suddenly felt a lot longer than 8 hours. Tyler didn't go home after his shift ended. He couldn't. The Horizon's Promise was scheduled to dock in less than 5 hours, and he still didn't have the kind of proof that would make station management listen. His apartment felt too far away, too disconnected from what needed to happen. Instead, he crashed in the mechanic's break room, a cramped space with a worn-out couch that smelled like oil and old coffee. He set an alarm for 2 hours and closed his eyes, but sleep wouldn't come. His mind kept running the numbers. 4,000 people. 3 weeks short of fuel. No rescue possible at that distance. The alarm went off. Tyler splashed water on his face from the break room sink and stared at himself in the scratched mirror. He looked terrible. Dark circles under his eyes. 2 days of stubble. His work uniform was stained with grease and hydraulic fluid. He looked like a guy about to do something stupid. His tablet pinged. Messages from his network of mechanics across different stations. Danny on Mars. Rachel at Ganymede Hub. Old Pete working the Neptune routes. They'd all checked their records. Every station supplied by Drexler Stellar showed the same pattern. Only human ships. Only fuel systems. Always the same 3% variance. But here was something interesting that Rachel had noticed. Alien ships used completely different fuel injection systems. The Carthians used plasma injectors. The Alterans had crystalline fuel converters. The Quellan species didn't even use traditional fuel, they harvested energy from radiation fields. Only humans used the old-fashioned chemical fuel injectors that Drexler supplied. Which meant whoever was behind this had specifically targeted human vessels. That wasn't random. That was calculated. Tyler headed back to the maintenance bay. At 0600 hours, the day shift was starting to trickle in. A few mechanics who'd been pulled from other assignments to help cover the workload. They nodded at Tyler as they passed, but nobody talked much. Everyone was tired. Everyone was behind schedule. The Horizon's Promise arrived at 0647 hours. Tyler watched on the bay monitors as the massive colony ship maneuvered into its docking cradle. It was beautiful in a purely functional way. A cylinder 200 meters long with massive fuel tanks wrapped around its midsection and cryopods stacked in the rear sections. 4,000 people sleeping peacefully, dreaming of their new lives on a distant world. They had no idea their ship was carrying a death sentence in its fuel system. Tyler grabbed his gear and headed for the airlock. The ship's captain was already coming through, a tall woman named Lisa Garrett with steel gray hair and the kind of weathered face that came from 30 years in space. She had a tablet in one hand and an expression that said she'd dealt with enough bureaucratic nonsense for one day. "You the inspector?" she asked Tyler. Mechanic. I need to run a detailed check on your fuel systems. Captain Garrett frowned. We were serviced at Proxima Station 2 weeks ago. Everything checked out fine. We're scheduled for departure in 4 hours. I don't have time for unnecessary delays. It's not unnecessary. Tyler pulled up his data. Your fuel consumption rate has increased by 3% since your last service. That doesn't sound like much, but on a 4-month journey it adds up. According to my calculations, you'll run out of fuel 23 days before reaching New Arcadia. The captain's expression shifted from annoyed to concerned. That's not possible. Our navigation computer would have flagged that. Your navigation computer is calculating based on your original fuel efficiency rating. It doesn't know your injectors are damaged. Damaged? The parts were brand new. Certified by Drexler Stellar. Tyler held up his tablet, showing her the microscopic scans of the defective injectors. I know. That's the problem. Someone's been supplying compromised parts. They look perfect on standard scans, but they have microgrooves that increase fuel consumption. It's been happening for at least 6 months across multiple stations. Captain Garrett stared at the scans, her face going pale. 4,000 people. 23 days short. We'd be too far for any rescue ship to reach us in time. I know. And you're telling me this is deliberate? Someone is sabotaging colony ships. I'm telling you the parts are defective and I can prove it. Whether it's sabotage or just criminal negligence, I don't know yet. But I can't let your ship launch with those injectors. The captain was quiet for a long moment. Tyler could see her working through the implications. If she delayed launch based on one mechanic's theory and he was wrong, she'd face massive penalties. Colony missions ran on tight schedules. Investors, settlers, resource allocations, all of it depended on precise timing. But if he was right and she ignored him, 4,000 people would die. How long to verify your findings? She asked finally. Give me 1 hour. Let me physically inspect your fuel system. If I'm wrong, I'll personally apologize to every single person on your ship. And if you're right? Then we replace every injector before you launch and we figure out who's responsible for this. Captain Garrett checked her chronometer. 1 hour. But if station management tries to override this inspection, I'm going to need you to back me up. Yes, ma'am. Tyler suited up and headed into the Horizons Promises engineering section. The fuel system access panels were located in a cramped maintenance tunnel that required him to crawl on his hands and knees. Not exactly glamorous work, but that was the reality of being a mechanic. The important stuff was always in the places nobody wanted to go. He found the first fuel injector assembly and carefully removed it. Under his microscanner, the damage was obvious. The same precise grooves he'd seen in the parts at Kepler 7. But there was something else, something he hadn't noticed before. Tiny serial numbers etched into the metal. He compared them to Drexler Stellar's official database. The numbers didn't match. These parts had serial codes that didn't exist in the manufacturer's system. Counterfeit. These weren't just defective parts. They were fake components designed to look like premium Drexler products while actually being inferior knockoffs. Tyler's comm unit crackled. Webb, this is Director Phillips. What the hell are you doing on that colony ship? I got a call from Port Authority saying you've grounded a vessel without authorization. Tyler held up the injector to his helmet camera so Phillips could see. Director, these parts are counterfeit. Someone's been replacing genuine Drexler components with fakes that cause increased fuel consumption. This ship would have run out of fuel before reaching its destination. There was silence on the other end. Then Phillips' voice came back, tight with stress. Webb, do you understand what you're saying? You're accusing a major supplier of either gross negligence or deliberate sabotage. That's corporate warfare territory. That's lawsuits and investigations and regulatory nightmares. I'm saying 4,000 people were about to die and I stopped it. That's my job. Your job is to service ships and follow protocols. Not to play detective and make accusations that could bankrupt this station. Tyler felt anger flare in his chest. My job is to keep people alive. That's what mechanics do. We make sure the machines work so people don't die in space. If that means stopping a ship from launching, then that's what I do. You're suspended, effective immediately. Return to the station and hand over your equipment. No. Excuse me? I said no, Director. I'm not moving from this position until every injector on this ship has been replaced with genuine, verified components. You want to fire me, go ahead. But I'm not letting this ship launch until I know it's safe. Captain Garrett's voice cut into the channel. Director Phillips, this is Captain Garrett of the Horizons Promise. I'm backing my mechanic's assessment. This vessel is not launching until the fuel system has been completely inspected and certified. If you have a problem with that, take it up with the Colonial Transport Authority. Tyler could hear Phillips cursing under her breath. Then her channel went dead. He continued working, removing injectors one by one, documenting the counterfeit serial numbers, building an evidence file that couldn't be ignored. Around him, the ship hummed with the sound of 4,000 people sleeping peacefully, unaware that their lives had just been saved by a stubborn mechanic who refused to accept that 3% variance was acceptable. His tablet pinged again. Danny from Mars Station. Tyler, I found something. There's a warehouse worker at Proxima willing to talk. Says he's been loading shipments for Drexler and noticed discrepancies between the manifests and actual contents. Might be the break we need. Tyler smiled grimly. The pieces were starting to come together. Somewhere, someone was running a massive scam. Counterfeit parts that increased fuel consumption, which meant ships had to buy more fuel, which meant someone was making a fortune off the difference. He just needed to prove it before station management shut him down completely. Tyler emerged from the Horizon's Promise covered in hydraulic fluid and grease, holding a bag full of counterfeit fuel injectors. He'd been inside the ship's engineering section for 3 hours straight, and his back was screaming from crawling through maintenance tunnels. But he had what he needed. Physical evidence. Documented serial numbers that didn't match manufacturer records. Proof that couldn't be dismissed as paranoia or acceptable variance. Station security was waiting for him at the airlock. There were 4 of them, wearing the standard gray uniforms with station patches on their shoulders. The lead guard, a guy Tyler vaguely recognized from the cafeteria, looked uncomfortable. Mr. Webb, we need you to come with us. Director's orders. Tyler held up the bag of injectors. I need to get these to the evidence locker first. This is proof of criminal sabotage. We have orders to escort you off the premises immediately. You've been terminated for insubordination and unauthorized interference with scheduled departures. 4,000 people were about to die, Tyler said flatly. I stopped that from happening. That's not insubordination. That's doing my job. The guard shifted his weight, clearly not wanting this confrontation. Look man, I'm just following orders. You can file a complaint with the labor board, but right now you need to leave. Captain Garrett stepped out of the airlock behind Tyler. This mechanic is operating under my authority as ship's captain. According to Colonial Transport regulations, I have final say over any maintenance performed on my vessel. He's not going anywhere until I'm satisfied this ship is safe. The security guard looked between them, clearly out of his depth. Ma'am, station management has jurisdiction over all dock operations. Not when it comes to flight safety. Check your regulations, officer. Section 47, paragraph 12. A ship's captain has absolute authority to delay departure for safety concerns. This mechanic identified a critical flaw that would have killed everyone on my ship. He stays. Tyler's comm unit buzzed. It was Danny from Mars Station, voice urgent. Tyler, don't trust station security. I just got word from my contact at Proxima. Drexler Stellar has people embedded in security departments at major stations. They're trying to shut down anyone asking questions about the parts. Tyler's stomach dropped. He looked at the security guards with fresh eyes. Were they just following orders, or were they specifically there to stop him from exposing the truth? Before anyone could move, alarms started blaring throughout the docking bay. Emergency lights flashed red. The PA system crackled to life with an automated warning. Security breach detected. Docking Bay 3, unauthorized vessel movement. Everyone's heads turned toward the main viewport. One of the maintenance tugs, a small utility craft used for moving cargo containers, was moving away from its charging station. It slowly positioned itself directly in front of the Horizon's Promise's departure gate, blocking the massive ship from leaving. The security guard touched his comm unit. Control, who authorized tug movement in Bay 3? A confused voice came back. No authorization logged. The tug's moving on manual control, but we're not showing anyone in the pilot's seat. Tyler felt a cold certainty settle in his gut. He pulled up the tug's control interface on his tablet. The access codes had been changed, locking everyone else out. But he recognized the override pattern. It was an old mechanic's trick, the kind you learned from working on ships for years. Someone was inside that tug and they jury-rigged the controls to prevent station security from taking remote control. They were physically blocking the Horizon's Promise from launching. His tablet pinged with a message from an encrypted channel. Sorry Tyler. Couldn't let you take all the heat alone. They want proof? I'm giving us time to find it. Rachel, Ganymede Hub. Rachel. She must have caught a transport to Kepler 7 and snuck into the maintenance bay while Tyler was inside the colony ship. Now she was barricaded in a maintenance tug, creating the kind of incident that station management couldn't ignore. The security guards were shouting into their comm units. More alarms were going off. Director Phillips' voice cut through the chaos on the PA system. "This is Director Phillips. To whoever is operating Maintenance Tug 7, you are in violation of multiple station regulations. Power down immediately or we will be forced to override your systems." Rachel's voice came back over the open channel, broadcast to everyone in the docking area. "Can't do that, Director. I've disabled the remote override. You'll have to physically cut through the tug's hull to get me out, and that'll take at least 6 hours. Maybe longer if I keep welding it shut from the inside. This is terrorism. You're holding a colony ship hostage." "No, ma'am. I'm preventing a death trap from launching. My colleague Tyler Webb found counterfeit fuel injectors on that ship. Parts that would have caused catastrophic fuel depletion 3 weeks before the ship reached its destination. 4,000 people would have died. We're not terrorists. We're mechanics trying to stop a mass murder." The docking bay went silent. Every person in the area was listening now. Dock workers, other ship crews, passengers waiting in the observation areas. Rachel had just made this public in a way that Phillips couldn't bury. Tyler's tablet buzzed with incoming data. Files from Danny on Mars, from old Pete on the Neptune routes, from a dozen other mechanics across half a dozen stations. They'd all been digging. They'd all found pieces of the puzzle. And now Tyler could see the whole picture. Drexler Stellar hadn't been hacked or infiltrated. They were the front company. Someone had created an entire fake supply chain that looked legitimate on every official database but was actually pumping counterfeit parts into the system. The defective injectors caused ships to burn 3% more fuel. Over hundreds of ships across 6 months, that added up to millions of liters of excess fuel consumption. But who benefited from ships burning more fuel? Tyler pulled up ownership records for fuel supply companies along major trade routes. It took him 10 minutes of cross-referencing, but he found it. Shell corporations. Layers of financial obfuscation. But at the center of it all, the same investors who owned controlling shares in Drexler Stellar also owned a network of fuel stations strategically positioned along the routes that human ships traveled most frequently. It was brilliant in a horrifying way. Create parts that caused ships to burn more fuel. Install those parts at major service stations. Watch as ships had to refuel more often at your fuel stations. The customers never realized they were being scammed because the increased consumption was small enough to seem like normal variance. Until colony ships started running out of fuel in deep space. Tyler looked up at Captain Garrett. "I need to make a call. There's one authority that even station management can't override." He opened a channel to the Galactic Commerce Authority, the independent regulatory body that oversaw trade across multiple species territories. The operator who answered sounded bored until Tyler explained what he'd found. Then he got transferred. And transferred again. And again. Finally, a senior investigator named Commissioner Vance appeared on his screen. The Vraxi inspector who'd been criticizing Tyler's work all week suddenly appeared next to the video feed, mandibles clicking rapidly. "I am Senior Inspector Chittering Sixth Brood," the Vraxi announced in its flat, translated voice. "I have been monitoring this situation. The human mechanics findings are accurate. I have independently verified the counterfeit serial numbers. This constitutes sabotage under Galactic Commerce Authority Regulations, Section 89, Subsection 14. This overrides all local station authority." Commissioner Vance nodded slowly. "Mr. Webb, you're claiming systematic sabotage affecting hundreds of vessels?" "Yes, sir. And I can prove it. We've got counterfeit parts with documented serial numbers. Fuel consumption data from multiple stations. Financial records showing the same investors owned both the parts supplier and the fuel stations. And we've got a colony ship that was about to launch with 4,000 people toward certain death. How long until you can compile a complete evidence package?" Tyler looked at his tablet at the files still coming in from his network of mechanics. "Give me 12 hours, sir." "You have 12 hours. The Horizon's promise is grounded until further notice. Station security is hereby placed under GCA authority. Director Phillips, you will provide full cooperation or face criminal charges for obstruction. Is that understood?" Phillips' voice came back weak, defeated. "Understood, Commissioner." The channel closed. Tyler sagged against the bulkhead, suddenly exhausted. Captain Garrett put a hand on his shoulder. "Thank you," she said quietly. "You saved my people." Tyler shook his head. "Haven't saved anyone yet. Still need to prove this thing goes as deep as I think it does. Rachel's voice came over the comm from inside the tug. Tyler? We good? Because I really need to use the bathroom. Despite everything, Tyler laughed. Yeah, Rachel. We're good. Come on out. He had 12 hours to build a case that would bring down a criminal conspiracy spanning multiple star systems. 12 hours to prove that sometimes the guy working the night shift sees what everyone else misses. Time to get to work. Tyler didn't sleep for the next 11 hours straight. He turned the mechanics' break room into a makeshift command center, with printouts and data files covering every available surface. Rachel brought coffee every hour, the cheap station stuff that tasted like recycled engine coolant but kept him awake. Danny joined them via video link from Mars Station, and old Pete connected from his position near Neptune. They weren't just building a case. They were building a fortress of evidence that nobody could tear down. The hearing was scheduled for 1,400 hours in the station's main conference hall. Tyler arrived at 13:45, still wearing his grease-stained work coveralls because he didn't have time to go home and change. He carried 3 tablets, a bag of physical evidence, and a data stick containing testimony from 47 mechanics across 18 different stations. The conference hall was packed. Ship captains who'd been delayed by the investigation. Station administrators looking nervous. Security personnel standing along the walls. And sitting at a long table at the front, 3 judges from the Galactic Commerce Authority representing 3 different alien species. The lead judge was a Carthian, a crystalline being that looked like someone had carved a person out of purple quartz. Light refracted through its body in strange patterns. When it spoke, its voice came out as musical tones that the translator box rendered into precise, formal English. This tribunal is convened to investigate allegations of systematic sabotage affecting commercial shipping operations. The human mechanic Tyler Webb has been granted 12 hours to present evidence. That time period has now expired. Mr. Webb, you may proceed. Tyler stood up. His hands were shaking slightly, but he forced them still. He'd faced down malfunctioning reactors and explosive decompression. He could handle some judges. Thank you, Honor Tribunal. I'm not a lawyer. I'm not a corporate investigator. I'm just a mechanic who fixes ships. So I'm going to explain this the way I'd explain a broken engine to someone who doesn't know how engines work. One of the other judges, a floating aquatic creature from the Quellan species suspended in a tank of liquid, made a bubbling sound that the translator rendered as mild amusement. Please proceed, mechanic. Tyler pulled up his first data set on the main display screen. 6 months ago, human ships started showing a 3% increase in fuel consumption after being serviced at major stations. Nobody noticed because 3% falls within acceptable variance. But here's the thing about mechanics. We don't like the word acceptable. We like the word correct. Something is either working right or it's not. He showed them the data from Kepler 7, then Mars Station, then Ganymede Hub. Ship after ship, all showing the same pattern. Only human vessels. Only after servicing. I started looking at the replacement parts. Specifically, fuel injector assemblies from Drexler Stellar Components. They looked perfect. Passed all standard inspections. But when I examined them under microscan, I found microscopic grooves inside the injector nozzles. These grooves cause turbulence in the fuel flow, which increases consumption by exactly 3%. He held up one of the physical injectors, placing it under a magnification camera so everyone could see the defects on the big screen. The third judge, a Vraxi similar to the inspector who'd been criticizing Tyler all week, clicked its mandibles. Manufacturing defects occur. This does not prove sabotage. You're right, Tyler agreed. So I checked the serial numbers etched into these components. Every legitimate Drexler part has a unique serial number registered in their manufacturing database. These parts have serial numbers that don't exist in that database. They're counterfeits. Fake parts designed to look like premium components but actually cause damage. He brought up the database comparison, showing genuine Drexler serial numbers alongside the counterfeit ones found in the defective parts. 47 mechanics across 18 stations have now confirmed the same thing. Counterfeit Drexler components installed in human ships, all causing the same fuel consumption increase. Over 6 months, affecting approximately 840 ships, this represents roughly 15 million credits in excess fuel costs. The Carthian judge's crystalline body shifted colors slightly. 15 million is significant, but your initial report mentioned lives at risk. Please explain. Tyler took a breath. This was the part that made him angry every time he thought about it. The Horizon's Promise. Colony ship carrying 4,000 people in cryosleep. Destination: New Arcadia, 4 months away. The ship was serviced at Proxima Station 2 weeks ago and fitted with counterfeit injectors. I ran the calculations based on the ship's fuel capacity and the 3% increased consumption. He brought up the math on screen, showing it step by step so everyone could follow. Fuel capacity, burn rate, distance, time. With those defective parts, the Horizon's promise would run out of fuel 23 days before reaching New Arcadia. Too far from any station for a rescue ship to reach in time. 4,000 people would wake up from cryosleep to discover they were drifting in deep space with no hope of survival. They would die slowly as life support systems failed. The silence in the conference hall was absolute. Tyler could hear the ventilation systems humming in the background. That's not aggressive business practices, he continued. That's mass murder. And the Horizon's promise isn't the only ship at risk. We've identified 43 colony ships and deep space exploration vessels currently in transit with compromised fuel systems. We calculate that at least 12 of those vessels will experience catastrophic fuel depletion before reaching their destinations. That's over 30,000 people. The aquatic Quellen judge bubbled urgently. This is unacceptable. Emergency recalls must be issued immediately. Already done, Tyler said. My network of mechanics has been working all night identifying affected vessels and calculating their current positions. We've transmitted emergency warnings to every ship we could reach. But some of them are already too far out. They'll need rescue missions, fuel transfers, emergency refits. It's going to take weeks to fix this mess. The Carthian judge leaned forward. You mentioned financial records earlier. Have you identified the responsible parties? Tyler nodded and brought up the corporate ownership documents. Drexler Stellar Components is the obvious culprit, but they're actually just the front company. The real operation goes deeper. The same investment group that controls Drexler also owns a network of fuel supply stations along major human trade routes. Fuel Corp Galactic, Stardrive Refueling, and 6 other companies. He showed the ownership chains, the shell corporations, the layers of financial obfuscation that all traced back to the same group of investors. Here's how the scam works. Install defective parts that make ships burn 3% more fuel. Ships have to refuel more often. They refuel at stations owned by the same people who made the defective parts. The customers never realize they're being scammed because the fuel consumption increase is small enough to look like normal variance. Over time, across hundreds of ships, it generates massive profits. Rachel stood up from the audience. And it only targets human ships because we travel the longest routes and consume the most fuel. Other species use different fuel injection systems that aren't compatible with these counterfeit parts. This was specifically designed to exploit human vessels. The Vraxi judge clicked its mandibles in what Tyler had learned to recognize as extreme agitation. This tribunal has heard sufficient evidence. We find credible proof of systematic sabotage, criminal fraud, and reckless endangerment on a massive scale. Immediate actions to be taken. 1. All vessels serviced with Drexler Stellar Components in the past 8 months are grounded pending inspection. 2. Emergency rescue operations are authorized for all at-risk vessels currently in transit. 3. All assets of Drexler Stellar and associated companies are frozen pending criminal investigation. The Carthian judge's colors shifted to deep red. Mr. Webb, your diligence has prevented a catastrophe. The Galactic Commerce Authority grants you temporary authority to coordinate the recall and repair effort. You will have full access to station resources and personnel across all GCA jurisdictions. Tyler blinked. Sir, I'm just a mechanic. I don't know anything about coordinating operations across multiple stations. You know how to fix what is broken, the judge replied. That is precisely what is needed. You have proven yourself capable of seeing problems that others miss and taking action when others hesitate. We trust you to apply those skills to this crisis. The next 6 weeks were the longest of Tyler's life. He worked 100-hour weeks coordinating with mechanics across dozens of stations. They identified compromised vessels, calculated rescue trajectories, organized fuel transfers in deep space. The Horizon's promise was repaired and launched safely, 3 weeks behind schedule but with everyone alive. Not all the ships were so lucky. 2 exploration vessels ran out of fuel before rescue could reach them, but emergency cryosystems kept the crews alive until recovery ships arrived. It was close. Too close. Drexler Stellar collapsed within a month. The executives were arrested. The investigation uncovered 17 years of fraud, with the fuel consumption scam being just the latest scheme. Insurance claims eventually hit 847 million credits. The Galactic Commerce Authority held a formal ceremony 3 months after the tribunal. They awarded Tyler the Star of Commerce, a decoration usually reserved for ambassadors and trade negotiators who facilitated major agreements between species. Tyler wore his best clothes, which still looked shabby next to everyone else's formal attire. The Vraxi inspector who'd criticized his work that first night stood at the podium giving a speech. Other species build systems and trust those systems to function correctly. Humans build systems and then immediately begin questioning whether those systems are actually working. This seems inefficient. This seems paranoid. But in this case, human paranoia saved thousands of lives. The mechanic Tyler Webb noticed what our systems missed. He investigated when our protocol said everything was acceptable. He acted when our procedures called for patience. This is the value humans bring to galactic commerce. Tyler returned to Kepler-7 3 days later. He could have taken any job he wanted after the publicity. Corporate positions, consulting work, teaching positions at fancy academies. He turned them all down and went back to working the night shift. Now he had a crew of 12 mechanics working under him. 8 humans and 4 aliens who wanted to learn what they called the human approach to maintenance. Tyler taught them the lessons his father had taught him. Trust nothing until you verify it yourself. Never accept acceptable variance. If the numbers don't look right, they probably aren't right. At 0300 hours on a Tuesday morning, 6 months after the tribunal, Tyler was alone under a freighter in Bay 7. His crew had gone home hours ago. He preferred working alone in the quiet hours anyway. That's when he could hear the subtle sounds that machinery made when something wasn't quite right. His scanner flagged a support strut with a hairline fracture. The AI marked it as acceptable stress distribution within normal parameters. Tyler marked it for immediate replacement. Not on my watch, he muttered, reaching for his cutting torch. Above him, Kepler-7 rotated silently through the void, its lights twinkling against the infinite darkness of space. Inside, thousands of people went about their lives, completely unaware that their safety depended on stubborn mechanics who refused to accept that good enough was actually good enough. Sometimes the most important person in the entire station is the guy working alone on the night shift, paying attention to the small details that everyone else ignores. Sometimes 3% variance is the difference between life and death. And Tyler Webb would never stop checking the numbers, no matter how acceptable they seemed.